Could you speak to us a little bit about your work?
Yeah, what I do is look into ancient systems of knowledge. And this means going back into the remote past, figuring out how our ancestors did things, how they built temples, why they built temples, why they put them in where they are, why they made them look the way that they are. And then figure out what it is about these places that makes us so passionate about them. So, for example, when we go to a pyramid, for example, why is it that we do these things? I mean, we can go to any place in the world, but we choose to go to these places which are so spread around the world, and we somehow are changed by these sites. So my function is to figure out how they were put together, how they work, or as I like to say it, what they do for you and what they do to you. Because something fundamentally changes in the way that people behave, the way that they think, the way that they feel once they've visited some of these sacred sites. And they come home feeling very, very different to when they first left home. It changes their perspective on life. It changes their whole viewpoint on the world. And suddenly everything that's central to their lives in their normal world doesn't make much sense. They begin to almost alchemically change the way that they live, hopefully for the better, and usually for the better. And the upside of all of this is that when you start getting together and integrating the wisdom of the ancestors in your life, you suddenly realize that this stuff has no expiry date. It goes on forever, it's universal, it has no timeline. It operates as it always has done. So, for example, a Native American who was building a sacred site 10,000 years ago, the same principles would be at play at work today if you were to do this in your own home or in your own garden. You'd have exactly the same experiences, you'd have the same visions, the same changes of perception, and that ultimately comes to focus on who you are as a person, how you relate to your environment, how you behave to the people around you. And it's that concept that slowly helps you to become who you are as an individual. You discover yourself, and you are able to not only navigate life in a much more effective way, but also you become a better person within. And slowly that's how society changes for the better. And there's proof that thousands of years ago, societies lasted for thousands of years in perfect equilibrium, and ours can't function today for more than a few decades before it falls apart. So naturally, we're getting something very wrong. And the big difference between us and them is that we're so enamored with all these gizmos, you know, cameras and cell phones and iPads and Blackberries and Blueberries and Raspberries and God knows what else. We have no concept of the world around us. We're so enamored with technology that we've lost track of the fact that technology should be a tool for something, not something that we give our power away to. And I think that we're going down a road which is very dangerous, which is we're giving our power away to objects which really, once they stop functioning, we cannot actually function in relationship to our planet. And that's very important. And that's what differentiates us, our society, from the people that came before. And that's why I do what I do. I try to bring into focus what these people knew and how we can apply that old information to the world we have today.
Wonderful. What interests me about all of these sites is that interplay of the geometry of how the sites are built, whether it's a sacred temple or it's Stonehenge, and the resonance and the energy information that's emitted from these sites. Could you speak a little about that?
Yeah, it becomes very apparent once you start looking at sacred sites around the world that they're all very different. A pyramid is different to Stonehenge. Stonehenge is different from a Native American kiva. And yet fundamentally, when you start taking these places apart, you realize that they're all built on a fundamental geometric principle. Geometry was basically an extrapolation of nature. I don't know how they figured this out, but they could figure out essentially that the building blocks of life are all based on geometric formats. And that's something that we've only discovered in the last 60 years with the advent of an electron microscope. So how they figured this out is a mystery. And what they figured out was that if nature is perfect and this geometry is inherent in nature, therefore, in order to bring ourselves into equilibrium with our environment, we build temples which have that geometry hardwired into them. So by this wonderful process where you walk into a temple that is built on certain geometric principles, that energy transfers itself to you, and you hopefully walk out of there as a holy person. You are whole within yourself and within your environment, and that's fundamentally how these places were built and how they differ from an ordinary building. We talked today, for example, about sick building syndrome. We have square rooms, we have rectangular rooms, offices, which it's not just the air that doesn't seem to circulate well, it's the fact that geometry is wrong. The atoms and the molecules that are within our cubicles at work, for example, they have no ability to move in a way that is beneficial to the human body. So consequently, we feel sick, we take days off work, we don't feel well, we feel stressed. But you go into a temple or even a Gothic cathedral, which is built on the same laws, and yet people, you can't find angry people in these places, you don't find tired people in these places, because the places themselves are uplifting. And it's not just the columns and the decor of these places, it's the fact that they are built to certain laws of the universe, and those laws are having an effect on you. Because the cells in your body are also geometric. So they're slowly changing that internal structure that's become altered because of how you live your life. And that's why we seek these places out. We want to have that experience of connecting with the sacred place, and hopefully when we go back home we feel totally whole within ourselves. So they're very magical, alchemical transmutation points which exist on the face of the planet. And that's why we do pilgrimage to sacred sites. We hope to come back as much more fulfilled people.
Fascinating. You were saying that, with a lot of tourists coming to certain sites, how does that impact the sacred quality of that?
Oh, it impacts it in a great way, because I've observed, and this happens to anyone after time, where you actually observe and you can almost hear the temple. And it sounds strange, and it did sound strange to me when I first got into this work, but yet it's very obvious that these things breathe and they live, and they can be measured scientifically. And usually when people just show up en masse on a big tourist bus and they sit there taking photographs and doing their own thing, it's like the place feels different. It's like it's just a bunch of rocks sitting in the middle of a plain. And yet you go back when it's quiet, in perfect reverence, and you go there with your intent and this openness to connect with a spirited place, and the place opens up to you, and magic starts to happen. Things appear around you, coincidences, and it does feel as if the places actually expand like a living organism. And the two of you are having this sort of magical transformation between you, this conversation, and it does. You become part of the temple, and the temple becomes part of you, and you are altered when this happens, without any length of the imagination. It is absolutely true.
You speak a lot about intention. If, let's say, you're going there and you want to have a healing of some sort, you speak a lot about intention. Could you explain a little bit about that?
Oh, the intent is everything. I mean, there's a famous saying that where intent goes, energy flows. And it's very true, because we now know that intent is a sort of a packet of energy, and it's electromagnetic, and it can be measured. And this intent, when you formulate an idea of something and you send it out into the universe responds in kind. Your environment starts picking up on this intent, and parts of the environment which resonate with that intent suddenly are attracted to that packet of information. And when that happens, that's when the magic starts to occur, because the environment conspires to work with you to create whatever it was that you wanted. So let's say you go to a sacred site and you actually go there with your intent, and you're well formulated and you're very balanced. It's amazing how many times you will see people going home and finding whatever it was that they tried to create is now coming true in their lives. Doors are opening, people that you meet, coincidences and strange, unusual phenomena start working around you. It's perfectly natural. And those things start changing your path, your directed path in your life, and that's when suddenly you are living your dream. So the ancestors were absolutely right. Whenever you work in a very measured way with your belief system, and we all have our own belief systems, there's no real right or wrong, it's just what's appropriate. And when you take something that's very appropriate to your direction in life, and you work with that in the temple starts to basically explode that 1,000-fold, and it takes on a life of its own. And I'm speaking from experience as well. As an atheist, a former atheist, a recovering Catholic, who now believes in God. But I don't mean that in a religious sense. I mean that in a nature sense, where I work with forces of nature, what people call fairies or nature spirits. We all have our own terminology for it. But I work with the processes of nature to basically create this information around me, which I draw from, and then I'm able to teach people about it from direct experience. So in a sense, it is magic when you think about it. But magic, as the Egyptians very well knew, is nothing more than the harnessing of the natural laws of the universe, because that's how they saw it. So when you talk about magic, Aladdin, things like this, we're actually borrowing from a very old tradition. It's just our cynical culture doesn't really take it in. They laugh at it. It's, they see it as a film, the prospect of Disney films or science fiction. But yet, science fiction also has its basis in a foundation in reality. It has to borrow from life to create that science fiction. And yesterday's science fiction is now today's reality.
Right.
I mean, look at cell phones, for example. Or wristwatches that had televisions on them back in the days of Dick Tracy. It's now fact. So all of this is actually part of our natural environment. We just have to stop being cynical about it and just engage with it and try it and see if it works.
So for those of us who cannot go to a sacred site, I would imagine there are buildings, cathedrals, where we live in our own city that we could go to.
Yeah, I mean, for example, in North America, in the New World, which is actually not very new at all. It's only from the European perspective that it's actually new. We have ancient sacred sites. We have the mounds that the Native Americans used to frequent. Those are power points. They exist exactly in the same intersecting lines of energy that the Earth produces, that Stonehenge and the pyramids are built on. They just look different. So we can stand on those. We can go to holy wells, Gothic cathedrals. They're built exactly on the same laws and principles. And failing that, you followed what the Egyptians taught you, which was that you are the temple. In fact, there's a wonderful phrase at the Temple of Edfu in Egypt that says that the reason why we keep building temples is that we keep building them until people realize that they are the temple. So, and this is a very Buddhist philosophy, that you don't need an external stimulus to create a perfect world. If you go within yourself and you believe in yourself, you start realizing that you are actually a very potent person. And if you believe that and you see it and you sit with it, you can ask your own questions. You can actually create using your own intent and the power of your own mind. Entrepreneurs, for example, are very good at that. And what they do is that's their intent is to create wealth. Some people might think that is using energy for the wrong reasons, but that's their reality. Your reality will be different. You will create a beautiful garden or a beautiful building or a cathedral. So it's really up to our individual moral compass to define where this energy goes and what you create with it.
Wonderful. It's been a real pleasure to have you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
I recommend anyone to come to your website and look at your material. It's fascinating.
I recommend they do as well.
Thank you, Freddy. Bye.